All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today, I'm going to run you through a Bitcoin self-custody proposal that I am sending to a friend. So someone that I'm essentially doing some consulting with at the moment. It's a document I created uh, over the last couple of years, and I think it's very relevant to anyone that's looking at Bitcoin. And so this is an entry level, let's say, masterclass as to how I would suggest to someone to look after their own Bitcoin, make sure they keep it themselves, make sure they don't take any crazy risks, make sure that they can definitely get it if they need to, or equally, heaven forbid, you get hit by a bus tomorrow, can someone actually find it and make sure it goes to who's needed? So I'm going to do this as a kind of like a presentation, but I'm just reading from the document. In order for this to work on audio, I'm just going to read it so people can hear it. And I will link the document itself in the show notes, and people can go and have a look at it for themselves. It might even work quite well if you look at the document at the same time I read it. Okay, so context is I'm bang into Bitcoin, and I talk to people about it. It's radically improved my life. And like anyone, it's a viral process, right? It's been organically adopted. The way that it does that is like people tell each other about it, right? It's like, oh, this thing, it worked really well for me. Do you want to hear about it? And so in this instance, this is a close family member of mine's friend who I've met a number of times. I'm going to keep their details very, very vague, but they are over the age of 50. Retirement is around the corner. They are hesitant with their relationship with the existing banking system. They are entry-level technology, so use a phone, use a laptop, spend time online, but wouldn't know their way around a Bitcoin custody if they tried. So this is like new stuff for them, but very keen on like, okay, I want to keep my money. I'm fed up with having it in someone else's bank and trusting them. So this presentation is relevant for someone in those shoes. Now, whether or not you're 25 or 55, this technical setup is still just as valid for, heaven forbid, you were to die tomorrow. I've titled it a Bitcoin self-custody protocol for A. So this document, I'm going to lay out the different options you have at your disposal when it comes to Bitcoin self-custody and the route that I've recommended. So taking into account where someone's at on their journey right now. Now, a company, a fund, a government, an individual, there is always a solution out there, but it's just a case of trying to understand, well, what's the right one? And obviously keep in mind that there is no perfect solution and everything has a trade-off. So whether it's like super easy to use or it's really, really secure, or you've gone for this like ultra private setup, perhaps also do you have to trust someone in order for it to work? There's a long list of different features that a Bitcoin self-custody setup can have. And so I just run through some of the alternatives for A. In my opinion, this is the best for them. At the end of the process, I want you to feel totally comfortable with your setup, be in ultimate control of your money, and then able to happily receive, send, and store Bitcoin yourself. First, let's spend a bit of time thinking about the problem. It's like, well, Bitcoin's quite daunting. It's this new thing for many people. You may not own very much of it so far. The way that you own it might not be in this self-sovereign, self-custody manner, but you might be considering like a much larger allocation into Bitcoin. Let's say you've been dabbling around with it, a couple of percent of your net wealth. Well, now it's like, actually, I want to put in a lot more than that. But with that comes the fact I need to make sure that this custody thing is done properly. And so the simple question I like to ask is, what happens to your Bitcoin if you were hit by a bus tomorrow? And so let's not beat around the bush. You need to be certain, like 150% certain, that if you were to drop dead right now, your Bitcoin goes to who is supposed to go to. There's horror stories, right? People searching for lost laptops in rubbish dumps. Let's say you're died behind the grave. You're like, oh my God, I hope someone had the passcode to my iPhone. Or the executor of your will, like, they can't even read your handwriting or something simple like that. But this process is designed to make sure you've got a really robust and straightforward process in place. Bitcoin's very nascent technology. It's moving very fast. So this, in theory, needs review at least every 12 months just to make sure you're using the best tools that are out there. But they give you great confidence. And in truth, securing multi-generational wealth in a self-sovereign manner has in fact never been easier. Kind of crazy, right? It seems really daunting, seems really hard, but actually this is This is something that's never been possible before. So in terms of a solution, there's lots of different ways of custodying Bitcoin. Now, the workflow you're going to have to go through is, in this case, we are in Australia. So you might have a bank account with one of the big four banks like myself. You're going to have to send Australian dollars to a Bitcoin exchange. Now, there's a number of different exchange businesses here in Australia that I would have a look at. I've used a number of them. Currently, I like to use Hardblock. So shout out to Daniel for the business he's building there. But I've used lots of other ones as well. So up to you to figure out which exchange you like. But with the exchange business, you'll have to send them some ID of some form. So there's a KYC process. And that might take, often it's very fast, right? You literally just send a driver's license, and the back end technology is so good these days that you're approved within, 30 minutes and it's done. So make sure you've got some time to sign up with an exchange, and you want to send a dummy run from your bank to the exchange. You'll find that there are better relationships with certain banks and certain exchanges as the total volume you can send. If you're sending $100, all of them will do it no problem. If you start sending $100,000, well, that's when the bank starts putting capital controls in place and says, you're sending too much. Is this person, real? Do you know that Bitcoin's a scam? And the capital leaking from the traditional system is it's extraordinarily fast. And so they're plugging the gaps at every possible point they can, making it difficult for people to move money into what they describe as crypto. But I'm really only interested in Bitcoin, and as you should be too. So we'll have to get you set up with an exchange that you're comfortable with. You'll send your dollars to the exchange. You'll then buy the Bitcoin. But once you've got that Bitcoin, leaving it on an exchange exposes you to the counterparty risk of that exchange business. Now, I like to use Bitcoin-only businesses, again, like Hardblock, shout out, because I know that they're not doing any shenanigans in the background with lots of altcoins and taking basically huge risk on highly speculative software projects. So my strong advice to anyone out there is get your Bitcoin off the exchange. So where do you send it? Well, you're going to send it to a wallet that you control. And this is the key. This is one of the superpowers of Bitcoin. Once you get Bitcoin into self-custody, you are in one of the safest places that have ever existed to own wealth. You could use a custodian. So there are companies out there that will hold your Bitcoin for you. You could do something called collaborative custody. This is when someone holds the key to the Bitcoin wallet for you. And there are a couple of different types of collaborative custody. I won't go into that right now. There's then something called multi-institution custody. This is when you trust multiple companies to own keys for you. And then finally, I've mentioned already, your own self-custody. And within self-custody, you have a single signature setup and a multi-signature setup. And what that really means is either you have one key that accesses the wallet, or you have multiple keys. And we'll go on to explain what I recommend. Depending on who you are, each have their merits. It's a spectrum, right? We need to figure out where you're at and where you want to sit ideally on that spectrum. So either you trust someone with your money, or you trust someone with your key, or you trust a company, or you do it entirely yourself. Now, in your case, as an individual with basic technology skills, capital that's a critical part of your retirement, I recommend we get you set up with something called a self-custody multi-signature vault, and then an inheritance plan on the end. So this is essentially taking self-custody, so you control the wallet, and that wallet is only, you can only send funds from that wallet with a combination of 2 out of 3 keys. Now, there are different forms of multi-signature vault. You can get a 2 of 3 key setup. You can get a 3 of 5 key setup. There's lots of different variations on it, but the 2 out of 3 keys, in my opinion, is the most straightforward way of doing it. At the end of this process, you'll be totally accountable to yourself for the setup, which is hugely empowering, but it's very daunting in the first instance. Now, it's important, just generally speaking, to state, I believe very strongly in the sovereign properties of Bitcoin, and anything that takes away your ability to do that, like to send stuff when you want, to receive stuff when you want, to just to store it, right? It's a failure to enhance your own self-sovereign abilities. So I've said here, in short, when being your own bank, you need to make sure you remain the banker. Now, that's one of the reasons I don't like to recommend collaborative custody. So if you have a self-custody setup with a 2 of 3 multi-sig, if you have one key, you've trusted 2 other people to hold keys for you. And if you need to have 2 out of 3 keys approve a transaction, you have to call someone and get their permission to send some money. So it's not actually self-custody, which you've got to be really careful with this stuff, essentially. And that's why someone like myself who's been deep down this rabbit hole for a number of years, in my view, is really, really valuable to help you with this process. Multi-institution custody, I think, is a really nice play for more business-to-business stuff. And there's companies out there that are doing really well pioneering that. But the point is you have to contact these kind of people in order to move your stuff. And that's not the point of permissionless money. And permissionless money, it should remain permissionless. Only you should be able to send the funds as and when you want. And I've said here, beware. There are many businesses out there that conveniently ignore this fact in favor of their commercial interests. Now, initially, I was going to suggest to you a business called Unchained, who I'm very happy with. They are a 2 of 3 multi-sig provider that I've used for a number of years. They now have a updated term of service. That means they don't take on new Australian customers. So I have 2 options. Either I refer you to a friend of mine, which I could still do if you'd like a more proactive person to be in touch with, or I'd figure it out myself. And so I came up with a couple of different options other than Unchained. Now, I've mentioned here as part of my research, options like AnchorWatch or BitKey or Casa or Nunchuck, they're well known in the Bitcoin space. Ultimately, I've ended up recommending something called Theya. Now, if you really wanted, episode number 1, I think it was actually, Joe Consorti, building Theya right now, go and check out his episode of the Jake Woodhouse Podcast, and you can hear the story of how Joe got involved in Bitcoin and why he joined Theya and how he's really pumped about building that product out. I've been super impressed by the UX of the iPhone app, and it's been awesome in my experience so far. So I recommend we get you set up with Theya. So you'll have an app on your phone, and then you're going to have 2 hardware keys called Trezors. I believe you've already ordered them. We need to find you a couple of locations to potentially store these keys. And of course, you need to have a phone. Now, they do have an app, I believe, on iOS and on Android. So we'll need to just double check that. We should be able to just download it from the App Store or from Google Play. At the end of this process, then I would like to think you can answer these questions, right? So what happens if I lose 1 key? What happens if I lose both keys? What happens if Theya goes out of business? What happens if I die tomorrow? Who do I share my inheritance plan with? Spend some time researching. I've linked here the Theya website. They've got a great blog. They've also got a support service, so you can get on a call with them, no problem at all. And level up any questions that you might have. I found their consultation process great when I had a problem, and they are also one of the reasons I like them. They're well funded, right? So they've come out of a accelerated program called Y Combinator in the US, and from my experience thus far and viewing from a distance, they don't fuck around, these guys. So I'd be very, very surprised they struggle for more funding, and they've also continued to iterate on their product and improve in the last 6 months or so. So I think they're a strong option in the market right now for this type of product. And yeah, lastly, I've made this document to be living, so we can add to it over time. It's a link that you'll get that I'll send to you, and you can just go back onto that link each time you want to refresh your memory on what this stuff is. So specifically quoting from the document then, so the setup. So to try and keep things simple, let me explain some important points. When entering into the world of self-custody, on the one hand, it is daunting. On the other, it is empowering. If you fuck it up and your funds are gone, that's it. There's literally no one else to blame except for yourself. You could have oversimplified it, or maybe you made it too complicated. As an aside, I know people that have put passphrases onto wallets and they can't remember that they put the passphrase on and they can't get in. Like, that's it. It's gone. There's no customer service department to get hold of. Like, you fucked it up and it's gone. Luckily, you get it right and, boom. That's it. You're able to receive, to store, and to send permissionless money. And it cannot be debased on the back end. So the 21 million hard cap for Bitcoin, this is an absolute game changer. And therefore, it is a deflationary savings technology. So pumped about this. It's a win for the individual. And we now have access to a form of digital property rights never seen in human history before. Now, why bother explaining this? It cannot be overemphasized how important it is that we get this right. Now, the good news, it's actually not that hard. The better news, by the end of this, you'll be confident of doing it all yourself. All we need to do is follow the process, and I'm going to outline that now. A couple of other points. So why multi-sig? This is thinking under the bracket of, okay, I'm going to self-custody my Bitcoin. I'm not going to give responsibility to someone else. I'm going to do it myself. Within the bracket or bucket of self-custody, you've got a single-sig wallet or a multi-sig. And that really is like a signature. You're signing a transaction that is then broadcast on the Bitcoin network. So if you have a single-sig set up, it means that with one signature, the money can be sent. The Bitcoin can be sent. And there are a number of problems with that, because what happens, for example, if that key, if it gets burnt in a fire, or it gets caught in a flood, or it gets stolen, then that's a single point of failure. Now, there are nuances to this in that there are the hardware keys themselves, and also then the seed phrase backup. And we'll get to that later. That's another layer of sophistication. With the multi-sig, the key here is that you can actually better protect yourself from these single point of failures. Another one to point out is the $5 wrench attack. Now, a wrench or a spanner, as I would call it, doesn't cost $5 any longer. It's more like the $25 wrench attack. But you know, if someone came into your house tomorrow with a gun and was like, give me all your Bitcoin, and you had one key and they got the key and they just took it all. But in my view, when you've got a key in different places, it makes the theft of your stuff that much harder. And so a multi-signature setup is when you've got multiple keys. And so you'd have to find all these keys and then know how to use them. And it just makes it incredibly difficult to do. What you're going to need is 2 of these trays or hardware keys. Now, just a quick note here is there's lots of different hardware devices on the market. I've used Trezor for a number of years. That's what I recommend. But you could do some additional research here and look into other options. That's just what I'm going for at this stage. We will also write down, I touched on this just now, a seed phrase. So for each hardware device, we're going to also get a backup seed phrase of what will likely be 12 words, and you'll write that on a document. And if the hardware device fails for some reason, then the seed phrase can be used to recreate that hardware key again. We'll use some envelopes. You need a laptop. You need your phone. We'll have to figure out some secure physical locations. So common places that people might do this is a lockbox in your own house and a lockbox in a local bank or local security business. And equally, that inheritance plan, you then want to give to 2 different people. So if you were hit by a bus tomorrow, your 2 friends will obviously be like, shit, they've died. That's terrible. We've got their Bitcoin inheritance plan. And with this inheritance plan, they will be able to basically follow the treasure map and get hold of what is yours. And combined with your will, the estate will be managed sufficiently. And at least that's in theory the plan. Now, a point to make here, which I think is very good, is that like if you don't have the keys, you don't have the Bitcoin. And so it doesn't really matter what your will says. If the keys are not functioning for the person that's supposed to have them, then no one can get this Bitcoin. We have to get this right. It's a spectrum. On the one end, you could have someone else look after it for you, but then you have to trust them. On the other end, you can have an extraordinarily complex self-custody setup where actually even you can fuck it up yourself because you made it too difficult. So it's got to be easy enough to follow that someone who doesn't know how to do this can do it themselves. My final part here, in regards to the Bitcoin inheritance plan, so this is a critical document that you can print and complete in writing. Never write in it digitally. This is a treasure map that I suggest you share only with your nearest and dearest so they can access your Bitcoin should you get hit by a bus tomorrow. It's a piece of the puzzle that really set my mind at ease and helped me adopt it in a major way. The first time I saw one of these, I was like, oh, that's how to do it. And I was looking at this in such a way, it's like, okay, I'd owned a bit of Bitcoin from 2015 to 2020, sold some in 2016, sold some in 2017, still own some. 2020 rolls around, I'm like, oh my God, this is the most important thing I've ever owned. Best investment I've ever made, and I want to add to it. But this time around, I was buying at much higher prices, and I was looking at moving from like under 1% of my net wealth to like a lot more. So I knew that if I didn't get the custody process right, I couldn't in my heart of hearts sleep properly at night without getting this done first. So I had to figure out how to do the self-custody before moving into Bitcoin as a larger percentage of my net wealth. And that's a good point here. If you're just dabbling with Bitcoin and you're buying $100, that is, nothing in the grand scheme of things compared to your net wealth, then this is way too complex. You can just keep it on the exchange. Doesn't really matter. But if Bitcoin is going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5% of your net assets to 10 to 50%, and I know people that are sitting at like over 90% and very comfortable at that point, you need to have something like this in place. Now, I've also linked here to the Bitcoin inheritance plan. Anyone watching this can get it in the show notes below. And equally, I've added the Theya recovery guide. So who is Theya? Theya is a company. They're building a product. What happens if that company goes out of business and therefore that product's not accessible? Well, because you're building on Bitcoin, which is an open source, open monetary protocol, you can build technology that allows you to actually circumvent something like that. So the Theya recovery guide is a way to use a different piece of software to recover the vault with the keys. So you need someone slightly more advanced than someone who is basic entry level technology like yourself, but you could do it very comfortably with a number of my friends that I've met at meetups over the years. Now, what I'm going to quickly do is have a click on the inheritance protocol or inheritance plan and just read through that too. But it's important you guys, if you've got this far in the podcast, actually dig it up yourself and have a look. But it's basically, this is a treasure map, right? And if someone who's not ever used Bitcoin and has had their friend or their family member die, they're going to be able to read this and go through it. And it's basically, it's specific details on where the key is stored, who Theya are and how to get support from them, who I am and how to contact me if you need help with this plan, details on how to enter your passcode on your phone and your email address. And then equally, like, the trays or hardware keys, they have PIN codes on them and you can name them specifically. Maybe they're different colors. So it'll help someone understand which one's which. Like, where is the lockbox? Is it at home? Is it in a business nearby? Like, one of the advantages of having one of your keys in a storage box in a security business is the only way someone can access that box is either with you, or they're a named person on the account, or with a death certificate. Like, no one's breaking into that joint otherwise. So it's a very, very secure way of doing things. And it's basically just a set of details like, okay, once you've logged in on email, you can get into the Theya app. Once you're in the Theya app, you'll then see all the different vaults. And obviously, this is the cool thing about Bitcoin is, you can basically create yourself a new bank account at the click of a button, which is like, okay, I'm going to have 3 different vaults. One of them might be, that's going to go to a certain family member of mine, or one of them might be a trust that you've set up, or one of them might be your company that has Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Like, who knows how you're reconfiguring your Theya vault, but it's very, very versatile in terms of how you do it. Now, a really important point here is that every vault has a configuration. And in order for this to work, like if Theya went out of business, for example, you need to have this information to recover the vault. And there is a table here that I've left in the document that asks for what type of vault it is, the derivation scheme, the pub key, the derivation path, and the output descriptors. Now, it's a highly, 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 highly unlikely scenario that anyone's going to ever need to use this. But if you set up properly now, you will be able to sleep properly at night. And it's like, okay, I know that if I drop dead tomorrow, then someone will be able to find my Bitcoin. If Theya went out of business tomorrow, then I could rebuild this Bitcoin wallet in a different way using this document. So although it's actually very simple, which is basically a written document with a PDF, that the power of this, once you figure it out, is absolutely extraordinary. And I'm very excited because it's what really gets me going, right? Like, helping people take accountability for their money in a place that can't be stolen from them. Like, this is a game changer, absolute game changer. So as a starter point, when you reached out recently, I was like, okay, I'm obviously very happy to help because of the connection. This is the first step, is to basically get this document, read through it, get the tools that we need to put it all together, think about where you're going to store the keys. And then there's a bunch more consulting to be done to coach you through how to actually do it when you plug it into the computer, and like how to write down the seed phrase and how to look after it. But I thought this would also be a really interesting piece of content for my podcast, where I have audience members that are thinking about how they might best custody their assets. And this is just one way of doing it. You're taking off-the-shelf products and you're tapping them together in a way that makes sense for yourself. And that's really what it means to build on top of an open protocol. It's like, here's the building blocks. You can use them how you wish. And that's what's so exciting about it. So if anyone has any questions, my email address is hi@jakewoodhouse.io. Please do get in touch. And, I'd love to hear from you. Like, is there any way that this resonates with you that I hadn't thought about? And is there a superior way of doing things that I don't know about? Then please do get in touch. Obviously, there's lots of different ways of doing this. So at the end of the day, take a deep breath. We can figure this stuff out. It can take some time, but the beauty of Bitcoin and self-custody is it just sits there, right? It's not like a real estate investment where you've got tenants and a dodgy shower, or you've bought an equity at the wrong time and actually the CEO was skimming money and now it's rocketed down by 50%. It's not that. You're buying something very, very different. This is a way of securing a percentage of a network that is the largest infrastructure of computers ever assembled, that in my view, without any shadow of a doubt, will be around in 100 years from now, which is not what you can say about any piece of real estate or any equity on the public markets, or for that matter, any government bond. I mean, forget it. These governments might be long gone by then. You can take responsibility for your own money. You can sit it in self-custody and be extremely confident it's going to be there tomorrow. Extremely confident it's going to be there in a year's time. Extremely confident it's going to be there in 5 years' time. I mean, even 10 years from now, like 10 years, it seems like a very long time. And it is. When I think back 10 years ago, I'm like, whoa, so much has happened. But like, in terms of wealth management, that's actually not that long. And to be able to confidently say that this shit will still be there, this is a game changer. And it absolutely shits all over the traditional banking system, where if you sat in Aussie dollars for the next 10 years, you're guaranteed to have your purchasing power eroded. And you might end up in crazy situations which have happened in the past, like in Cyprus. If you had more than a certain balance in your bank account, I think it's 2013, 14, this happened. They did something called a bail-in. Like a bailout, central bank pumps loads more money in and helps everyone out. A bail-in is when depositors have cash taken from them. So it's this kind of process of like, well, your money in the bank's not actually your money. Even though every advert I've ever seen for a bank makes you feel like there's some kind of like paternal or maternal character and they'll always look after you. But are they? And will they? And now there's another option. And I highly recommend that everyone start studying this thing, figuring this out, and getting their capital across into Bitcoin. I have gained huge value from doing this. And through processes like what I've described today, that conviction level and that confidence level increases. But you have to use it. Like, it's not for just sitting there necessarily. You've got to start playing around with it. Send it to someone. Go and buy it from a different exchange. Sit it in a different type of custody. Try send it to a friend. Get them to send it back. Like, if you don't start getting familiar with this stuff, then you'll never feel truly confident with it. With that, I'll leave it there. I hope you've enjoyed this, and thank you so much.